When Downton Abbey announced they were making a third movie, fans actually were against it, with many begging that they let the franchise rest. Imagine that, fans of a franchise actively wanting the creators to stop making more. Even the actors wanted out. 𝘀𝗵𝘁 confessed in an interview about the second movie that it would be better to just quit where we are and that a good death for his character would be good. So with fans not wanting more and the actors wanting their characters to die just so that they could be done with it, we find ourselves with a trilogy of movies that, despite being some of the most questionable writing and acting choices I have ever seen, still have Rotten Tomatoes ratings on par with The Godfather. The third movie has just come out and it is doing amazingly well. Despite all the reviews saying that it's slow and boring and nothing happens, they still rate it highly based on the assumption that fans love it and the reviewer just doesn't get it. It gets this free pass. Watching the movies is like pouring hot syrup over your brain. It makes you forget where you are or what you just watched, and diehard fans seem to just be blissfully unaware that what started as a pretty compelling TV show 15 years ago has turned into hot slop without them really noticing, and all of these once three-dimensional characters has become two-dimensional caricatures that do nothing to affect the narrative, a narrative that has become so diluted and empty it might as well not exist. These fans have been in the pot so long they don't realise it's boiling, and someone has to point out the flaws in these movies and the reasons why they don't work. Someone just has to, and that someone will be me, Uncle Herman, an alpha male. And why am I so passionate about the failings of the Downton Abbey movies? Because this show used to mean something, god damn it. We used to have something good, I swear. We had a member of the IRA infiltrating an English aristocratic family and marrying one of their daughters. We had servants having illicit affairs with dukes. We had cousins making out in the snow. We had a serial killer on the loose. We had a heart-wrenching death after childbirth, followed by Dan Stevens being hit by a milk truck in the last minute of a Christmas special, just like Paul Blut's mother and Paul Blart Mall Cop 2.
That is, until she got drilled by a milk truck.
It wasn't perfect, but it was dramatic. Millions of people remember where they were that Christmas that they killed Matthew so brutally, minutes after holding his newborn son in his arms. But now, 15 years after it first aired, this franchise has been getting away with too much for too long, and nobody is talking about it. Also, with the increased use of AI to make video essays, I want to make a quick statement that no AI is ever used to write, record, or edit my videos. I get comments about it all the time, but this is my human voice and my real human vendetta against the Downton Abbey movies, all of which came right from the depths of my human heart. A heart that wants you to protect your personal data from the people selling it online. So I want to take a quick moment to thank my sponsor for this video, 𝘀𝗂𝘂𝘶. I think the reason I'm so drawn to period dramas is because I dream of a time where technology does not exist and the whole world did not have access to your name, address, personal information, and plethora of personal data. But unfortunately, it's 2025 and your data is probably on way more sites than you realize, and it's honestly currency right now. There are data brokers out there legally collecting and selling your personal information without you ever knowing and exposing your data to anyone who wants to buy it. But thanks to my sponsor 𝘀𝗂𝘂𝘶, you can take your privacy back. 𝘀𝗂𝘂𝘶 automatically finds and removes your information from hundreds of data broker sites. And with their custom removals feature in the unlimited plan, if you spot your own information on a data broker site, you can send them the link and their team will go in and handle it and remove it for you. So if you want to protect your identity and your privacy online from prying eyes, you can try 𝘀𝗂𝘂𝘶 risk-free for 30 days, and if it's not for you, you can get your money back, no questions asked. Just head to 𝘀𝗂𝗂𝘁.com/UncleHerman and use my code UncleHerman at checkout for 60% off their annual plan. Thank you to 𝘀𝗂𝘂𝘶 for sponsoring this video and for helping me and my audience stay private in a world that's getting less private every day. Now, the thing you have to understand about Downton Abbey is that both the series and all the movies are written by just this one guy, Julian Fellowes. This one very pro-England, pro-monarchy, pro-rich people guy who was born into British aristocracy himself. And so the main premise of Downton Abbey is that rich people like him have problems too. And poor servants have problems, but the problem is not that they are poor servants. They love being poor servants. Their problems are things like being gay or being a serial killer. It's not quite self-aware enough to be a satire, though it could have been a great one. It instead is simply a love letter to rich British people. So with no input from anybody else at all, and about 25 main characters, the first movie feels like a first draft. A hot slop brain fart first draft, just going straight to production with no real care about doing the characters or the fans justice. Just reckless abandon. Coming in at a cool 2 hours and 2 minutes, the first movie came out in 2019 and is simply called Downton Abbey. The main plot of this movie is that the king and queen Queen are coming to visit Downton Abbey, but it's not really a plot because the King and Queen visiting is actually a completely passive event. Plot implies narrative drive. It implies a problem, a climax, and a resolution. Here we have the King and Queen coming to Downton Abbey for one night. We will not really see them talking to anyone or affecting the plot, and then they will go and everybody's lives will remain unchanged. The main issue for me with the Downton Abbey movie is the fact that it's supposed to be a continuation of the series, but the issue is that they pretty much disregard everything that they built towards in the series if it no longer serves them. Set in 1927, only 1.5 years from where we left off in Series 6, the biggest example of this blatant disregard for the show is Mr. Carson. Played by Jim Carter, who is fantastic. He is kind of the heart of Downton Abbey. He has an iconic look, iconic eyebrows. He was the butler keeping the whole house running, the man in charge below stairs, who was also in cahoots with the family. He's close with Mary, with Lord Grantham, and with Violet, who, if we boil it down, are kind of the 4 central pillars of Downton Abbey. The people who care most about the house and the reputation of the family and having everything done properly, and also probably the most recognizable outside of the world of the show. They also feel like extensions of Julian Fellowes himself and his views. Now, Mr. Carson may be working class, but he doesn't identify with any of it. He identifies as an extension of Lord Grantham. He loves his oppression as a servant. He loves to serve. He loves his country. He loves conservative politics. And what was so final about the final episode of the series was that Carson stepped down after 50 years of service to this family. He gets an essential tremor, a neurological condition that Julian Fellowes has in real life. So Carson can no longer hold things. He can no longer pour drinks or carry trays, for example, which is kind of a large part of his job. So he was forced into retirement and Thomas Barrow became butler. And Thomas Barrow, who is a under butler who was about to be fired, then became the butler. But now what do, right? We have a movie where Carson is not the butler, but it wouldn't be Downton Abbey without Carson at the helm. The only reason Thomas got to become butler in the last moment of the series was because we would never actually see it. So what Julian decided to do was piss all over the series 6 finale by pretending Carson does not have a tremor anymore, magically curing him and making it seem like Thomas is not a good enough butler for the royal visit. And so Mary decides that Carson just has to be back for the super contrived reason that Thomas seems to be rushing around too much and not polishing the right silverware. So Carson is cured, but this version of Carson is like a fever dream imposter version of the character we once knew. And that's true for nearly every character. There's something about the movies that just feels off. Everyone is suddenly a caricature of themselves. The posh people sound even posher, conversations are really stilted. It's like they're all acting in a spoof of Downton Abbey.
Any more talk like that, and we'll all end up in Botany Bay.
The whole crux of Downton Abbey, since it started 15 years ago in 2010, is that change is coming. Every episode, at least 2 people will talk about change, about how the world is changing. And yes, the next 40 years are going to bring huge changes, but not for Downton Abbey. Nothing in Downton Abbey ever actually changes. Fundamentally, the characters all stay the same. You think they're going to lose everything, but they never do. And then when they actually do make changes, they just go right back on themselves. Things can only change for a few moments before going back to exactly how they were, even if that means magically curing a disease and forcing a man who is now well beyond the life expectancy of the time to come out of retirement and work again as a butler. The only character who really changed is Tom Branson, because Tom Branson had to change in order to become palatable. You see, Tom Branson started in Downton Abbey in Series 1 as the chauffeur, and in my opinion, one of the most compelling characters. He was an Irish socialist who was vocally anti-monarchy, anti-establishment, and anti-England. He wanted Irish independence. He then fell in love with the youngest daughter Sybil and married into the family, much to the family's disgrace. And in Series 3, he gets in trouble and he flees Dublin because the police are hunting him for burning down an aristocratic family home, just like Downton. And he reveals that if he returns to Ireland, he will be arrested. So they reluctantly let him stay at Downton Abbey, where his wife later dies in childbirth, and he's left as the widower, who is then taken in by the family. And from about season 4 onwards, he is then defanged, declawed, and watered down until he is but a whisper of the character we once knew and loved. As he integrates with the Crawleys, he no longer cares for left-wing politics or even Ireland. He doesn't oppose anything they stand for anymore. He just quietly sinks into the background, and now in the movie, the royals are coming to visit, the pinnacle of British conservatism, the enemy of Irish independence. Branson once compared Ireland being ruled by the English king to England being ruled by the German Kaiser.
Home rule on English terms presided over by an English king.
Was keeping the monarchy a problem?
Would it be a problem for you to be ruled by the German Kaiser?
But movie Tom Branson has no qualms now. He harbours zero resentment towards the king and queen, apparently. The people still unjustly ruling over his home country that he cannot visit, presumably where his whole family lives, but this is his family now, and they love the king and queen. And so Branson's storyline in this movie is actually saving the royals from an assassination attempt. You couldn't get further from who he was. You traitor, Tom Branson. The Branson I knew and loved would have killed King George V and changed the course of history as we knew it. But instead, he very easily manages to stop this guy from shooting them. He hands the guy over to the police and we're done with it. No payoff, no repercussions, just a really simple resolution. And you're sat there with 75 more minutes of the movie to go thinking, what now? So this is obviously a pro-monarchy movie, and Queen Mary in real life was known for being a kleptomaniac and impulsively stealing little trinkets and such from the homes and the places that she visited. But Julian Fellowes decided to rewrite history a little bit and actually blame the stealing on her servant. And we have the Queen's dresser, played by Susan Lynch, blamed for pocketing expensive items from Downton Abbey.
Queen's dresser a thief. That'll make headlines from here to Peru.
So in the Downton Abbey cinematic universe, Queen Mary was mistakenly accused of theft, and it was actually her hardworking and devoted servant who was the reason that all these things got stolen. The plot for the servants, bar Daisy, and thank God for her, is that they love the king and queen so much that even though the royals have their own staff who will come to Downton Abbey to do all the cooking and the cleaning and the serving for them, giving the Downton Abbey staff a few days off that they rarely get, the resident staff would rather lock all the royal staff in their rooms and cook and clean and serve themselves than take the days off that they deserve. Apart from Daisy, who is the only left-wing character who remains left-wing and is the only person who doesn't care about the king and queen. So as punishment, her plot for this movie is her reluctantly realizing that she actually likes her fiancé enough to marry him. You see, Julian Fellowes has a habit of forcing late-game relationships between people who either have no chemistry or have a good enough friendship but no romantic love. And so Daisy was forced with the only remaining single straight man, Andy, who she dislikes so much that she won't even hear talk of her own wedding.
For a start, you never talk about the wedding anymore.
We'll get wed when we're good and ready and not before.
But you see, I am ready.
Take those up before we collapse.
But then a hot plumber comes to Downton Abbey to fix the boiler, and Daisy is friendly towards him, which sends her fiancé into a jealous rage. And that jealous rage is supposed to be proof that he loves her, and she is supposed to love and accept him by the end because he was jealous. But it's pretty clear to me that she is about to be trapped in a loveless marriage, and I'm supposed to be happy for this poor woman. Now, despite all of these mounting problems, there were two romantic storylines in this movie that I actually enjoyed. Tom Branson finds love with the maid of the Queen's lady-in-waiting, but don't worry, he's not actually in love with a poor person, because the maid turns out not to actually be working class, but instead is her lady's secret daughter, and she's going to inherit some big royal house. Is it a bit forced? Yes. But in my opinion, the actors have great chemistry. And the final scene where she's not allowed to dance with the posh people, so they dance outside together instead, is really nice. And then we have Thomas Barrow, the under-butler turned butler who is basically dismissed for this movie. He, for the first time since season 1, episode 1, actually consensually kisses a love interest. Thomas Barrow finds love with the king's dresser, Richard, who, now that Thomas is basically dismissed, invites Thomas to York on his days off, and Thomas goes into York and ends up at an underground gay bar, and then the bar gets raided and he gets arrested, and Richard comes and gets him out of prison in the most flirty way possible.
Just need to be a bit more circumspect in future, Mr. Barrow.
I don't know why, though, the police let him go simply because the guy who turns up works for the royal household. There's no posting bail, there's no argument. He's just like, well, I work for the Queen, therefore Thomas should come with me. It could have been something, but they took a lot of creative liberty with how Thomas gets out of prison because he has to get out really quickly because he can only have so much screen time. But I did like this plot. It had real stakes. I wish it hadn't been completely separate from the rest of the movie, though. It kind of felt like its own movie. If it was in the series, it could have been over multiple episodes and Thomas wouldn't have just got out of prison right away, because Downton Abbey loves to keep a man in prison for a whole series, and we could have seen the upstairs family's reaction to Thomas being in prison, and it could have had actual repercussions. That's why Downton Abbey lends itself to being a series rather than the movies, because there are so many characters that we have developed and watched for so long and that we care about, and if you really want to have any of their storylines be impactful or have arcs, then you really need to give them time to breathe and develop, not just haphazardly smush them all altogether. But alas, we take what we can get, and I liked seeing this previously tortured character have a romantic storyline that did not cost him, and also have him remain a bit catty in the process, because this character's always been a bitch, and this is the last movie where Julian remembers that.
Why are you here again, Mr. Carson? So you could keep control when I would fail, was that it? I forget.
Mr. Barrow, would you mind?
I'm not on duty, Mr. Carson, you are.
Anyway, the movie ends with everything being back to how it was, bar that Tom Branson now has a new love interest and Edith is pregnant, and Matthew Goode drives in and kisses Mary right at the last second to prove that he still exists. He was the guy who was very randomly married to Mary right at the end of the series in a way that was completely unsatisfying and unearned. But despite everything, this movie was the best of the trilogy in my opinion. How we wish they could have just left it there. A full 3 minutes longer than the last, Downton Abbey: A New Era graced our theatres in 2022 and in my humble opinion was a new low point for British filmmaking. This movie takes the weird caricature nature of the previous one and adds to it tenfold.
Actresses plastered in makeup and actors just plastered.
Also adding a stark colour grade and a Trump orange fake tan for Lord Grantham. It's all the characters you know and love from the series forced to come back for another movie that is not so much an extension of the series as it is poorly written fanfiction. If the first movie was fanfiction about what would happen if the royal family came to Downton, this movie is what would happen if they filmed a Hollywood movie at Downton in 1928. We opened with Tom Branson marrying Lucy from the previous movie. That was easy, I guess we don't really get to see any more of their romance, they're just married now. The first line of the movie is, "I've never seen a wedding like it," which is mad because it's pretty much the same location or somewhere similar and the same vibe as every single wedding and every single garden party we've ever seen, if not a bit less fuss, to be honest. We never start these movies at Downton Abbey, they edge you. It always comes in 5 minutes in and the music swells and you see the house, and this I think is where they put you in a trance because it is epic and it comforts you if you're familiar with the music and the house, and you know for the next 2 hours you're going to be embroiled in the very small and minute issues of the British aristocracy as they face a new era. But not actually, because we're still frozen in the 1920s. Downton Abbey used to cover long periods of time in the series. We would see snapshots of their lives over the years, and time would move quite quickly. The first series spans 2 years, from the sinking of the Titanic in 1912 to the start of the First World War in 1914. Then the second series takes us from 1916 all the way to 1919, with the Christmas special seeing them into 1920. And then we slow down, and the series start to just span 1 year, and then we end series 6 in 1925. So you would think with the movies that they might take the opportunity to jump a little ahead, considering the actors are aging. Naturally we should be in the 1930s now, but that is dangerously close to World War II, and that no longer aligns with what Downton Abbey has become. We used to deal with war and politics, but not anymore. You see, the show accidentally became a very gentle, comforting show for many people from about season 4 onwards, and things started to slow down. The issues that people were dealing with became smaller, apart from the Bateses, who are in their own separate telenovela where everything bad is happening to them all the time. But the upstairs especially is dumbed down. There's a whole episode where the main crux is that the oven breaks and a dinner party is thrown into disarray and they have to eat cold meat.
Robert, come quickly.
What is it?
Apparently the oven's broken down.
It can't have done.
And the final season spends about 60% of its screen time on a pointless debate about whether or not the local hospital will merge with the county hospital. And you know what? I've watched that series about 10 times myself, and I could not tell you whether or not the hospital ends up merging at the end. So now that Downton Abbey has sort of firmly established itself in the cultural memory as a show that deals with small, mostly superficial issues, it's decidedly not going to go into the 1930s rise of fascism. And so the movies are all comically still set in the 1920s, a decade we've been stuck in since series 2. And this really works as a metaphor for the show as a whole, because all these characters, and by extension actors, really are stuck here, frozen in time. So Downton Abbey: A New Era has 2 main plots. One revolves around Maggie Smith's character Violet, as she reveals she has a villa in France that's been left to her in someone's will, and half the family go and visit it in France to hand it over, reluctantly, because the guy that left it to her in a will only met Violet for like a week or something, and they had like a little fling and he was in love with her, but she didn't return his favor, but he still left the villa in the will anyway. Unrequited love, beautiful. Meanwhile, a movie company wants to shoot a film at Downton Abbey, and they decide to say yes because they really need the money, because Downton Abbey has a leaky roof.
I haven't been up here for years.
Well, this is the situation we're in. With the money, we can bring the house up to snuff to match what we've spent on the estate.
And this plot is blatantly just copying Singing in the Rain. But without the amazing songs and dances and cinematography that makes that movie, it's just taken the basic plot of Singing in the Rain. So a woman who's a star of silent movies has to face sound being added to film, and she doesn't have the right speaking voice for it. She's kept her speaking voice quiet and is just hired for her looks. And so she gets dubbed by someone else who ends up being none other than Lady Mary.
Action!
Madame, monsieur, placez vos paris.
Bill.
You came back.
I always come back.
Sorry.
Cut.
But she's very difficult for me, but she's right in my ear. And you've got me coming out of bush.
I understand.
Carson obviously has to come back in some contrived way to be butler, because a shot of Carson in his little hat walking up the driveway of Downton is essential to the fan service that the movies are supposedly here to do. And we've established that Downton Abbey is not Downton Abbey unless Carson is butler, so now they do whatever they can to get him back in that position. And in this case, it's travelling to France as their butler once again, even though by the logic of the show, in 1927 he would now be about 71, and he's supposed to have an essential tremor, which by our current medical understanding is probably an indicator of Parkinson's disease. This is just like Matthew getting up after having his spine blown up and being paralysed from the waist down because they realised that they didn't want a disabled leading man. Lord Grantham even says himself that they don't know why they brought a butler with them to France.
We've become quite a party. I'm afraid we've even brought our butler. I'm not quite sure why. But how chic?
Because why would they? Even the movie has to have the characters acknowledge that it's weird that he's there. I don't know why Carson can't just be a character in the show that doesn't work. He still lives on the grounds of Downton Abbey and his wife still works there. Why they have to force him to work every movie is beyond me. It's like he's not a person unless he is serving Lord Grantham. Carson is also orange now and talks like he's a pantomime dame.
Rough and vulgar actors and actresses strolling through the rooms with their sticky fingers, sitting on the chairs, eating at the table where the King of England once sat. Oh, this smacks of the worst excesses of the French Revolution.
He's not the only one, but his scenes in this movie really do take you out of it. In a similar vein to Carson always being forcibly pulled back to Downton Abbey, so is Mr. Mosley. Mr. Mosley was a footman who is kind of the comic relief character. He left the series getting a job as a local school teacher, and that was him moving up in the world. And he has no attachment really to the people of Downton Abbey, apart from the fact that he worked there for so long and he has a long-standing crush on lady's maid Miss Baxter. But there is no reason for him ever to be in Downton Abbey. He has a whole life separate from it. But he is somehow pulled into this movie by simply being in the way, because he's so excited that they're filming a movie at Downton Abbey, and that's apparently his dream now. And so he just barges in and remarkably manages to get a job as a screenwriter because he writes extra scenes in his own time and forces himself onto the set. And they're so enamored by his excellent writing that they hire him to be a Hollywood screenwriter.
On an impulse, he snatches back his money. Rien ne va plus. The wheel spins. And every last thing he owns.
Mr. Mosley, please finish the script however you think best and bring it to me.
Remember how one of the only sacred things in the first movie was that we had good romantic storylines and how Thomas Barrow finally found love? Well, that man that he kissed is out the window because the actor who played him was not as famous as Dominic West, and they wanted Dominic West. So Dominic West is playing Guy Dexter, who's a Hollywood actor who is starring in the movie that they're filming at Downton Abbey. And Thomas Barrow now has this manufactured love story between him. This guy comes in, sees Thomas, fancies him, and after a couple days of filming and maybe 3 conversations, decides that he's going to ask Thomas Barrow to move to Hollywood with him and work for him as a dresser and organizer. And Thomas says, yeah, sure, why not?
Well, why didn't you come and see for yourself? What?
There's no real romance, there's no physical affection. It's like a business deal, and it leads to Thomas quitting his job as butler, which is what everyone always wanted, because then they can finally hire the immortal Carson back at the end. And another ridiculous plot that has huge stakes that are just eradicated really easily is that we're supposed to think that Cora, or Lady Grantham, is ill or is going to die in this movie. We are supposed to think that Cora is going to die, but then it's revealed to be pernicious anemia, which is the same thing that we thought this other guy had in the series, but it turns out to just be regular anemia for him. So actually everything's fine. Every Downton Abbey movie has to have that plot that seems like it's going to have actual impact and repercussions and change things, but then it's just wrapped up in a way where there are no actual repercussions and the stakes are just removed. And in this one there's two, because not only is Cora anemic, but also Lord Grantham might not be his father's son. So Lord Grantham's mother, Violet, maybe had an affair with this French guy, but it turns out that he just loved her and they never had an affair, and he is his father's son. So nothing changes at all once again, and everything is fine. This is also a movie about Mary and Violet almost cheating on their husbands that they are unhappy with, and then doing the right thing and not. Violet in the past almost cheated with this French guy, but then decided that she couldn't. And that's also, I think, the second or third guy that it's revealed that Violet almost cheated on her husband with, which is kind of good for her. It seems like her husband was a terrible guy, but we never really get into it. Back to Mary. She cannot have a plot that doesn't involve finding a man. But because Matthew Goode, who she was rushed into marrying at the end of the series, seemingly doesn't want anything to do with Downton Abbey, he's just said to be away. And so she has a romantic plot with 𝘁𝗵𝗁 instead, who she eventually refuses when he tries to kiss her, because she says that she should do the right thing and be faithful to her husband. The dialogue in this movie is also quite tough. We have conversations where instead of answering direct questions, sometimes they just drop Wikipedia facts instead to remind you that it's a period piece.
Are you familiar with the south of France?
Well, I know Lord Brougham first made it fashionable in the 1830s when he was Chancellor.
And the absolute worst, most cringeworthy piece of cinema I've seen in recent times is this slow zoom on Carson as he recites King Lear after Maggie Smith's character Violet dies.
Blow winds and crack your cheeks. Rage, blow you cataracts and hurricanes. Has the moment of her leaving come at last?
I cannot believe that this was real and it wasn't a spoof. If you're going to make it silly, then just lean in and go all out. But the sad thing is that this was supposed to be serious and impactful, when instead it took me right out of it. Also, Violet's death has been so long coming that it didn't really feel sad. I also think that that's another reason that time started moving so slowly, is because they realised that if they did go into the 30s and 40s, that Violet would have to die. And Maggie Smith was such a key pull for a lot of people that they knew that they had to freeze time and keep her alive. But now finally, Maggie Smith got to leave Downton Abbey, and she got to die in a very good and satisfying way, surrounded by family, carefully planning her last words to each person, and then sort of just drifting off. And the movie ends with her funeral, and honestly I was glad for Maggie Smith. May she rest in peace. She seemed to want out ages ago. So everything is wrapped up once again, and it wouldn't be a Downton Abbey ending without new characters being forced to marry each other. So in this one we get Mr. Mosley finally proposing to Miss Baxter, and then Mrs. Patmore and Mr. Mason also agree to get married. To be fair, these two romances have been brewing a while, and I thought they would have happened sooner, but here we are. They haphazardly slapped them in at the end, and now we have new marriages and also new life as Tom Branson and his new wife have a baby right at the end. I also don't think we ever meet Edith's baby that she was supposed to be pregnant with in the first movie, I just realised. There are always just miscellaneous children around, but we no longer really know whose they are or what they're even called. So that was Downton Abbey, A New Era. That was not actually a new era. And then it was announced that we would be getting a third. And so we get the 2025 film, Downton Abbey, the grand finale. The film that nobody wanted, but that everybody got. This is actually their fourth attempt at a finale, technically, because we had the end of the series, and then we had the first movie that was supposed to be just a one-off, and then the next one was supposed to be the end. Maggie Smith left. It was a big ending, but they are telling us this is the end by calling it the grand finale. Please, God, let this be the end. You really get the sense from the actors that they have now said goodbye so many times that it's not exactly a grand or emotional goodbye anymore, but rather something that they all just gather to do for money at this point. It kind of feels like a sigh of relief for a lot of them that this is finally the finale.
What's it like to say goodbye after all these years?
Well, do you know, we've said goodbye several times, let's face it. We said goodbye at the end of the TV show in 2015, 10 years ago. Because I said to Gareth Neame, our executive producer, when he said, you know, we're going to make a film, I said, well, good luck with that, because you're never going to get all of us together again. You know, we'll all be off doing different things. But I think paychecks help quite a lot.
Do you think it's the love of the show that meant that everyone wanted to come back?
I think the love of the show and cash.
And the poor guy who plays Thomas Barrow has made it very clear that he does not want to be here by mentioning that he's only doing it for the money to pay off his mortgage at the top of every single interview.
How do we feel bringing Thomas back for one more time?
Oh, it's great. It's brilliant. It's fantastic to be here. I have 4 children and a mortgage to pay, so
That's why I'm here.
My mortgage agreement was coming up for renewal, and the interest rates in the interim had gone up massively, so the mortgage was going to jump massively, so I needed to pay it down. So when Downton came back, I was like, yes, I'm on that train.
So what do you do when you have a cast who are sick of it, a writer who doesn't really seem to care anymore, and fans that will take anything? You make a soulless movie that exists only to make money. I have seen this movie twice in theatres, which means I fed them the exact money that they wanted. But what could I do? I was curious. 𝘁𝗂𝘂𝗲 is here. But will they use 𝘁𝗂𝗂𝘂𝗲 in any pivotal scenes that mean anything? No. They had 𝘁𝗂𝗂𝘂𝗲 and he was underused. Do you know who you're dealing with? That's 𝘁𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗲, and you're going to have him for one day sleeping in a chair in Downton Abbey whilst everyone else goes off to the races? Here's the thing. I think it was an interesting choice to bring 𝘁𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗲 back. He was Lady Grantham's brother in one episode of the series, and they brought him back into this movie, and it could have been really good if they had just structured it better. But as it stands, this movie has no real conceit. Unlike the first movie, which had the royal visit, and the second that had the villa plot, and then we had making a movie at Downton, the hook of this movie is simply that it's the last movie, God willing. So it's more just snapshots of these characters' lives as they finally enter 1930 than it is any large event or anything that's actually tying it together. So we have the big financial crash of 1929 happen off screen because we've established that big important historical events no longer happen on screen or really affect Downton Abbey in any way. And old Uncle Harold has come in with his financial advisor Gus, played by Alessandro Nivola, to deliver the news that he lost their mother's fortune on bad investments. This is like a lot of money. Cora and her side of the family have always been the rich ones. The only reason that Lord Grantham married her was for her fortune. Now, Cora's fortune has already been lost a couple times and then saved again, but this time Uncle Harold has lost his mother's fortune. This guy Gus apparently saved some of the family money by withdrawing it from the stock market prior to the crash, but it's still all tied up somewhere and they need to get it back, but they don't know how. They just need to do something. It's very convoluted and unclear what the stakes are.
Don't you see what this means for Downton?
Is it really as bad as you say?
There's some property.
Gus is clearly sketchy and he has this one-night stand with Mary, and we see the most flesh I think we've ever seen in Downton Abbey, at least since series 1, because, you know, Mary is now divorced and so she has to have sexual chemistry with a man in order to have a plot. And then it gets interesting because we find out that this guy is a swindler and that he has a reputation for stealing people's wealth. And so he's actually stolen Cora's fortune. But we find this out not in any grand, revealing way, but instead just because some random American comes up to Tom Branson at the races. Tom, whose new wife did not come back for this movie and now has nothing to do. So Tom then delivers the news to the others, and then Edith tells this guy Gus to go away or he'll face her and her husband's wrath. And so he just goes away. It was that easy. He is currently sitting on their entire fortune and they just told him to go away. They didn't even tell him to give the fortune back. We don't know where this money is. Nobody ever has to earn anything in Downton Abbey. Their wealth, their good luck, everything is just handed to them on a plate. This guy is bad? No worries. We'll just make sure that someone comes and tells them that he's bad so that he can leave 50 minutes into the movie, and then there are no stakes and no repercussions for anyone for the rest of the movie. We assume that Harold gets the money back, but we don't know how. We don't ever see anyone interact with this guy again. We don't even see Harold's reaction to being strung along and swindled by this guy that he thought was a close friend for at least a year. They spend 50 minutes setting up this plot only for it to just stop and go nowhere. We could have had a really interesting movie here where they actually lost money and this guy ran away with it and they would have tried to get it back and face some hardship for once. But no, we're supposed to feel sorry for them because money is getting a little tighter and they are having to downsize their London home from a mansion to a very large condo. But we've established in the series that they own Downton Abbey, right? And they own another huge country home, but also they own the whole village that they live in. They own the village. Everyone that lives in the village pays them rent. And then there are at least 2 other mansions in the family. Robert's sister has a huge London mansion, and then they have the house that Violet lived in known as the Dower House. So losing one mansion is not really something we can feel sorry for them for. But Julian knows this because he basically uses it as a comic relief plot because it's so funny to see a posh man living in a condo. This is a very property heavy movie as a whole. The main goodbye finale moment is Lord and Lady Grantham moving out of Downton Abbey and into the Dower House, and we have this huge emotional goodbye goodbye scene. And then my friends that I was watching this with absolutely cackled when they realized that the emotional goodbye is because the parents are moving a 5-minute walk away. They don't even drive there, they just walk. It doesn't make sense for them to move out and leave Lady Mary and her 2 children alone in this 80-bedroom house, but they do for the symbolism. And to leave Mary all alone in Downton Abbey with her miscellaneous children, it's just sad, and it doesn't make financial sense. If they're struggling, why don't they sell that massive dower house and continue living in their 80-bedroom house? Mary can still run it and have her parents retire that role of running the house, but this whole thing is supposed to be symbolizing Mary now being the head of Downton Abbey. But we know that World War II is coming, and after that, the dissolution of the British aristocracy kind of as a whole. I mean, they still exist, but they don't really exist in the way that they did. These houses are going to be bought and turned into hotels and such, and that the real Downton Abbey, 𝘁𝗂𝗍 Castle, is really an anomaly that people are still living there, and they're barely living there. The only reason that 𝘁𝗂𝗍 Castle is still standing as a house that these people live in is because of the money that they make from Downton Abbey filming there, right? If Downton Abbey didn't choose that place, it would probably have been bought by the National Trust by now and turned into a hotel or something. So it paints a pretty bleak future for Mary, being there all alone in a house haunted by her dead husband, her dead sibling, and her grandmother, who we all see superimposed into the ending. And let's not forget the dead 𝘹𝗵𝘁, who communicated via Ouija board in season 2 that Matthew could get with Mary. So many people have died in this house. To think of her being there completely alone in this massive haunted house, it's so bleak. This movie, with all its faults, is actually slightly less caricature-y, and it feels more like the series, even though there are no stakes, and the money plot with Harold and Gus is handled so poorly that I don't even know that they got the money back or if they care. It does feel exactly like the later seasons felt, where there is no big conceit. It's just sort of vignettes of what's happening in their lives. It's like one long Christmas special, the way they used to do it. So in that way, I think it does give the fans what they wanted, but that doesn't mean it needed to happen or that it was a good movie. Nor should they have tried to handle the 1929 Wall Street crash if they really wanted to go back to their roots. I mean, the Christmas specials were always pretty good in my opinion. They were basically movies. They were about an hour and a half, and they explored lots of character stories that were insular and affected each other, apart from the Bateses, who were usually in prison. But it was otherwise about interpersonal conflicts and resolutions within the upstairs and the downstairs. We don't need Downton Abbey to deal with the financial crash. Either take it out and focus on Downton Abbey characters that we already know, or keep it in and expand it and show them actually facing financial ruin, because these guys have faced financial ruin about 11 times, and Lord Grantham has shouted about losing his money and place in the world every other episode, and there's never actually any loss or repercussion to the point that it becomes laughably redundant. You always know that they're going to be fine, so why even include it in the first place? But I guess they did that in the series and they're doing it in the movie, so it kind of is staying faithful to the Downton Abbey that we know and love. So there are 2 more plots in this movie that I haven't mentioned yet. There's a county fair that Isabel and Daisy are organising that's a classic Downton Abbey plot. I didn't love it, but at least we're going back to our roots with superficial arguments about organisational logistics that don't really matter. And then there's this plot where Thomas Barrow comes back with his Hollywood boyfriend, Guy Dexter, and out of nowhere, 𝘁𝗀𝗍. And they come to Downton Abbey to save the reputation and bring people to their dinner party, because no one will come to Downton Abbey now that it houses a divorced woman. So only these 3 gay men can bring the people back. And I liked this a bit. I like the divorce for Mary now that Matthew Goods officially will not be a part of this. They can't explain him away anymore. I think that it's better to have her divorced than have him just away somewhere and have her cheat on him. It was kind of scandalous, I guess, for a lady to be divorced back then in high society, and so she gets kicked out of a ball for it.
Prince and Princess Arthur of Connaught are on their way, and the princess simply cannot be in the same room as a divorced woman.
And this is maybe the first time that any of the daughters in Downton Abbey have been decidedly single. She has a one-night stand, yes, but she ends up single, and I never thought I'd see that from this movie, to be honest, so that's a plus. But Julian Fellowes did once again piss all over the memory of a real-life person by implying that Mr. Molesley came up with the title for 𝘁𝗀𝗍's famous play, Private Lives, and that Lady Mary was the inspiration behind it. There was also something a bit uncomfortable about the press tour for this movie. I know it's not necessarily a critique of the movie, but with these 3 straight men being gay for pay in 2025, it feels a little backwards, and in turn we get movies where the gay characters don't really show any affection, and the press tour is kind of really awkward, especially when they're being praised for bringing the gay representation, and then they're all just sat there really uncomfortably.
And I particularly loved when you guys kind of rolled up to the house. I turned to my colleague and I said, The gays have arrived.
It's the gay takeover. Yeah.
At least Thomas Barrow used to be gay for pay all the way, but now we get a watered down version of the character he once was. Even outside of his sexuality, he's been watered down. This character used to have all the best lines. Him and Violet were the kings of the one-liner.
Jilted at the altar. I don't think I could stand the shame.
Then it's lucky no one's ever asked you, isn't it?
But this guy is miles from the TV Thomas Barrow. Who is he? He's nervous all of a sudden. He's not the same character at all. And I understand that people change, but this is an imposter. And I wish they'd made no movies at all. But if we had to have a movie, they should have just made the one and left with a bang. These next two felt like beating a dead horse for everyone involved. Sometimes things need to be left as they are to marinate. It's a privilege for a TV show to get to end on its own terms rather than being cancelled, to decide when to let go and wrap up storylines in a satisfying way. And Downton Abbey got to do that. They had their emotional goodbyes, they had their climax, they had a body of work that was good for the most part, that they could all be proud to be a part of and look back on with fondness. But now these movies have ruined that. There's all this lazily written added canon that nobody really wanted and we're now stuck with. It was better to have left these characters' futures to our imaginations than to have these movies, in my opinion. It seems like Julian didn't even bother rewatching what he'd already written before writing this third movie, as there's a massive plot hole with a Della Francesca painting that had pretty much the whole of series 5 revolved around this painting. It ended up causing a guy to come over and it created a huge rift in Lord and Lady Grantham's marriage, and then they sold the painting to help save Downton Abbey from financial ruin. But guess what? In this movie, the painting is just back. They forgot about that whole big thing where they sold it. It's just careless. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, and I wish we could erase the movies and just let the series sit peacefully in its grave. They've said goodbye so many times, they're probably on the edge of their seats worried that there's going to be another Downton Abbey movie. I mean, I don't feel too sorry for them. They're all making tons of money off of this franchise, but there's no artistic integrity anymore. There's no soul. There's no love of the art. It's sad to see something that clearly started as a passion project, that started with well-developed characters and storylines, drive itself into the ground. This series was such a cultural phenomenon. It was such a silly show at its heart. It was a soap, but it wanted to market itself as a period drama, which was really interesting. It was melodramatic. It was fun to watch. And now the buzz is gone. People are going for nostalgia. They're not going because it's a good movie. And those are my qualms with the Downton Abbey movies. If you're still here, my God, thank you for being here. This is obviously not my usual Uncle Herman video, but sometimes you just have to make the things that you're passionate about, and this is what I'm passionate about. So thank you for staying with me. I appreciate you, and thank you for 𝘀cie for sponsoring this video, and I will see you soon in my next one.